Hey, Dr. Inductor. In the last video, I went over this test that I'm going to give my my entry people for robotics, my trainees, and now I'll go over the answers. Okay. For number one, I'll have to draw this just a second. Sorry, I didn't plan for this very well. There you go. All right. Okay. We've seen an electron before, right? Okay. So, you got your nucleus right here, right? Just say this one's a neutron. This one is a proton. Right? Right here. And then, I don't do brackets very well, ever. This isn't a nucleus. And then around the atom we have our orbital, right? And then our electron. Okay? This is what an atom looks like. Okay? Easy enough, right? We've already gone over this in the first video, basic electricity. Alright, so the second one was define coulomb. Well, I can't remember this number. I don't use coulombs very often. But it's a certain number of electrons more than protons. Alright? Number 3, define an ampere. It's coulombs per second. So if you have 1 point, it's the amount of electrons passing through that point. So it's the amount of coulombs passing through that point in 1 second. Write Ohm's law in its 3 forms. Okay, we've gone over this in Ohm's law before, right? So the first most famous one is I equals V over R, right? Capital R, right? I equals V over R. The second one is R equals V over I. And then the last one is V equals I R. Very important equations. It's utmost importance that my trainees learn this one, right? Okay. Number 5, resistance is the blank to the blank of electricity. Well, it's the opposition to the flow of electricity, right? 6, voltage can be analogized to the pressure of water in pipes, right? We've gone over this before. Number 7, the joule is the measurement for energy. Number 8, all wires have capacitance, inductance, and resistance. I didn't go over this yet, but it's true. 9, a device capable of transforming chemical energy into electrical energy is called a battery. 10, we use a device called a blank to measure things like voltage, amperage, and resistance. That would be a multimeter. 10, we use a device called, I just did 10. 11, a technical visualization of a circuit and its components is called a schematic diagram. 12, explain the differences between a fuse and a circuit breaker in terms of their capabilities. Well, if you've ever overloaded your household circuit and you know what a circuit breaker is, you have to go down in the basement or wherever your circuit box is and flip the switch back, reset the whole circuit. So a circuit breaker is just a fuse, right? Oh, I didn't say what fuse is. A fuse is just usually a little piece of metal that breaks easily, and when a certain amount of amps come through, it's rated for a certain amperage. This metal will burn, okay, so that it will open the circuit and electricity can't flow. So this keeps components like, appliances and stuff and lamps from blowing out and causing serious harm to everybody. And a circuit breaker is just that, except it's a little more complicated because it can be reset instead of being replaced by a fuse. Hopefully I didn't confuse you there. 13. How does measuring voltage differ from measuring current? Well, measuring voltage is really easy. You just have to, I'm talking about using a multimeter here, you just have to get in from parallel, right? You can just measure voltage with parallel probes. And then measuring amperage, you have to actually get into the circuit. You have to make it a series, so you have to see how many amps a motor is drawing. 14. A higher diameter wire yields a blank wire gauge. This is a lower wire gauge, believe it or not. It's very non-intuitive. but the bigger a wire is, the lower the gauge. It's kind of like it's just like shotgun gauge, right? 12 gauge shotgun is pretty big, but then if you get down to 4 gauge shotgun, and that's like an elephant gun. 15. How many amperes are 43 millionths? 0.043. 16. What is the unit of power called? It's the watt. Not to be confused with the unit of energy, which is the joule. I mentioned that earlier. 17. What kind of electricity is found in a wall socket? A wall socket uses AC, okay, alternating current, which is a sinusoidal wave. 18. What is required for the operation of a soldering iron? Hint, it's not solder, something to solder, or something to rest the iron on. Okay, this is kind of tricky, but we have to teach our trainees this. Every time you operate a soldering gun, this is extremely dangerous if you don't. You have to be wearing safety glasses, because when you go and say this is my soldering iron, right? You gotta flick the solder off sometimes. I know that's not really proper etiquette, but sometimes if you've got a bead of solder on a wire and you brush the wire, it'll flick solder into your face, so you do not want it to get in your eyes. So you have to wear safety glasses. 19. A generator does the job of a blank in reverse. Well, a motor is just a generator, right? If you hook a motor up to a battery, and it'll move, but if you hook a battery up to a motor with a diode and you crank the motor, you'll actually charge the battery if it's rechargeable. It's pretty cool. 20. Oh, my computer just went out. 20. List some ways to splice two wires together. Okay, there's probably endless ways. One really crude way is to just twist them together. We've all done this before, right? Another way is to use these things called crimps. Okay, I might go over this in the future. It's pretty important. You could solder them together, which is very strong. It's well, I don't mean strong like strong. It'll hold, but it'll adhere better. You have a greater surface area, right? Because it's wet, not actually wet, but it's called a wet joint, right? And you let more electrons pass through. It's more efficient. There's less power waste than a crimp or twisting them together. Okay, moving on to 21. Draw the schematic symbol of the following components: a battery, resistor, fuse, the ground symbols, and a switch. The reason I picked these, it's not arbitrary actually. These are found very often in robotics, okay? So battery is just, we've seen this before, right? It's just this, right? Oh no, there's not that. Here, let me just redo this. And the bigger one is positive, the smaller one is negative, this side, right? That's a battery. The next one is a resistor. Okay, this is just a zigzag line, right? And moving on, we have the fuse, which goes like this. It looks like the symbol for AC current, except it's got these lines next to it because it's part of the circuit. And now there's two ways to draw a ground symbol. Okay, this one is just a general ground symbol, the one on the left. And then this one usually refers to ground on a chassis. If you, the chassis of an object, if you solder something onto it or attach it in any way, it'll have that. Okay? And 22. The positive can also be called the signal. 23. The negative can also be called the common or the ground. Ground usually refers to something else, but I won't go over that right now. 24. Red or white wires are generally designated to what polarity? Positive. 25. Black or green wires are generally designated to what polarity? Negative. 26. A path that jumps a voltage source with very little resistance is called a short. 27. What four characteristics of an object determine the resistance? It would be temperature, length, diameter or gauge, and material. Metal conducts better than air. This material. Okay. 28. In what two ways can I ensure my crimp will be safe and consistent? Well, what you can do is you can add solder to the crimp, which is very strong, very efficient, wastes very little power, and you can heat shrink the sides. so that it doesn't short out another wire, and it also looks better. You know, we like to have our robots look good. 29. In what direction will conventional current flow, and in which direction do electrons actually travel? Well, conventionally we say that current travels from positive to negative, but actually they travel from negative to positive. 30. When handling electronics, assume everything you know is blank and always consult a mentor or your team leader if you are unsure of something. Assume everything you know is wrong. That doesn't mean doubt yourself, but that means if you're unsure of something, assume you're wrong and ask somebody who knows what they're talking about. This is one of my mentors. His name is Andy. He always says this. He's a pretty awesome guy, but this is very true. I've run into many situations where I need to assume what I know is wrong, because sometimes we forget we don't know everything, right? And that's when we run into problems and communication errors and whatsoever. That doesn't make sense. And whatnot is what I meant to say. Anyways, I'll stop boring you. This is a test. We don't like tests, right? That's what school's for. Anyways, it was good talking to you. Alright, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.